The hospital called me on a Tuesday morning in November. Not my stepmother, not my half-brother, not anyone from the world my father had been living in for the 12 years since he married Sandra, and that world had slowly, methodically closed around him until I was on the outside of it looking in. The hospital. A nurse named Patricia, who told me in the careful, practiced language of someone who delivers difficult news regularly that my father had been admitted the previous evening, that his condition was serious, and that he had been asking for me since he arrived. She said, "He's been asking for you specifically. He asked us to call you directly. He gave us your number himself." I said, "Did he give you anyone else's number?" She paused. She said, "No, just yours." I was in my car within 7 minutes, a 4-hour drive. I did not call Sandra. I did not call my half-brother. I drove the 4 hours with the specific, focused attention of someone who has been given a finite amount of time and intends to use every minute of it correctly. My father was asking for me. After 12 years of Sandra's careful, patient, invisible work, he was asking for me. I drove.
I need to tell you about the 12 years, because the deathbed is not where this story begins. My parents divorced when I was 9. My father and I had, in the years between the divorce and Sandra, the specific closeness of a parent and child who have chosen each other across the distance that divorce creates. He called every Sunday. He drove 4 hours to every school play, every graduation, every event that mattered. He was, in the years before Sandra, a man who understood that love required showing up, and he showed up. He met Sandra when I was 19. She was 41, elegant, with the specific warmth of someone who performs warmth as a primary social skill. Warm at the right temperature, warm in the right rooms, warm in ways that were difficult to question because the warmth was always technically present. She was warm to my father's friends. She was warm to his colleagues. She was warm to my half-brother Thomas, who was her son from a previous relationship, and who was absorbed into the family with the ease of someone who had always been intended to be there. She was warm to me in the way that a woman is warm to someone she has decided is a problem she is going to solve slowly. I did not understand this immediately. I was 19, and I was focused on the beginning of my adult life, and I had the particular confidence of a daughter who has always been close to her father, and who cannot imagine that this is something that can be undone. It can be undone. I know that now. It can be undone so gradually that the person it is being done to does not see it happening until they look back from a distance and understand the shape of what was built while they were not paying sufficient attention.
Sandra did not do dramatic things. This is what I want you to understand first, because the stories we tell about women like Sandra often involve dramatic things, obvious manipulation, clear cruelty, events that can be pointed to and named. Sandra did not do dramatic things. She did small things, consistently, over 12 years. She forgot to pass along my messages. Not all of them, most of them, which made the forgetting seem like oversight rather than pattern. When I called the house, she would answer and take a message, and then remember it later, after my father had already concluded I hadn't called, which produced in him a small, slow accumulation of hurt that he could not name. She interpreted my absences, the times when distance and cost and the logistics of a life made it genuinely difficult to visit, as evidence of disinterest, not to my face, to my father, in the careful, concerned voice of a woman who wanted him to know, gently, what she had noticed. She worried, she said, that I had pulled away, that the new life I was building didn't have much room in it for him, that he shouldn't take it personally. People changed, children grew up. She was always concerned, never accusatory. Concerned, which is the language that does the same damage as an accusation without leaving fingerprints. She managed the visits. When I came, there was always something, a family obligation of hers that meant the house was full of her people, a schedule that compressed the time I had with my father alone, a particular arrangement of the visit that meant Sandra was always present, and my father and I were rarely given the space that we had always used well. Our relationship had been built in the unstructured time of Sunday phone calls and long dinners alone. Sandra was very good at ensuring there was very little unstructured time. And she talked, to my father, about me, in the patient, loving voice of a woman who only wanted the best for everyone. She talked about what she had noticed, what she had observed, what concerned her, what she thought, gently, he might want to consider about the nature of my commitment to the family. Over 12 years, my father heard a version of me that Sandra had constructed. He believed it. Not all at once, not dramatically, gradually, the way you come to believe something that is repeated often enough by someone you trust, with the slow, almost unconscious accumulation of small doubts until the doubts have become the thing you believe. By the time I was 31, my father had become distant in the specific, painful way of someone who has been convinced that the distance is appropriate. He took my calls, but he was shorter on the phone. He mentioned Sandra's concerns, gently as his own observations, in ways that told me what had been said between those calls. The visits became formal in a way they had never been. He was present, but behind something. I kept calling, I kept writing, I kept showing up. He kept being a little further away each time.
I want to tell you about the card, because the card is the thing I held on to. On my 32nd birthday, 2 years before the hospital call, my father sent me a card, not through Sandra's arrangements, not as part of a family obligation, but a card he had bought and addressed and sent himself, which I knew because his handwriting was on the envelope and the postmark was from the post office near his office, not the one near their house. Inside the card he had written, "I think about you more than you know. I hope you know that." That was all. No explanation of the distance, no acknowledgement of what had changed between us, just that sentence in his handwriting on a card he had sent himself. I kept it. I have it still. I think about you more than you know. I held on to that sentence for 2 years because it told me something that the increasing distance could not erase, that whatever Sandra had built between us had not reached all the way down, that somewhere under the constructed version of me that she had been working on for 12 years, my father still had the original. I drove 4 hours toward that original on a Tuesday morning in November. He was in a room on the 3rd floor. Patricia met me at the nurse's station and walked me to the room herself. She said, on the way, "He's been much more settled since we told him you were coming. He's been waiting." I said, "Has anyone else come?" She said, "His wife was here last night and this morning. She left about an hour ago." She paused. "He asked her to leave." I looked at her. She said it simply, without editorializing, the way nurses say things they have witnessed and that are not theirs to interpret. He had asked Sandra to leave. I walked into the room.
My father was smaller than I remembered. This is what illness does. It reduces people in visible ways that are shocking when you have not seen someone in the accumulation of time that illness requires. He was smaller and more fragile, and he had the specific quality of someone who has been in a hospital long enough to have stopped fighting the vulnerability of being in one. But his eyes were the same. He looked at me when I came in, and his eyes were exactly as they had always been, the same gray-green, the same quality of seeing you specifically rather than looking in your direction, and whatever else had changed, the eyes were the same. He said my name, just my name, in the voice of a man who has been waiting. I sat down beside him. I took his hand. I did not say anything for a moment because there was too much to say, and the room was not the place for most of it, and he was tired, and I was not going to spend the first minutes in the accounting when what we had was finite. He said, "I've been wrong about some things." I said, "Dad." He said, "I need to say this. I've been thinking about it for a while, and I've been I've been wrong about some things and I need to say it. I said, okay. He said, she told me things over the years about you, about what she thought you felt about me, about what she had noticed. He paused to breathe. And I believed her. I don't know exactly when I decided to believe her instead of what I knew about you, but I did, and I'm sorry. I held his hand. I said, I kept calling. He said, I know you did. I said, I sent a card every birthday, every Christmas, every Father's Day. He said, I know. I said, she told you I didn't? He was quiet for a moment. He said, she said you sent them out of obligation, that you didn't mean them. I thought about 12 years of cards sent and a daughter sitting by a phone waiting for a response that reflected what was in them. I said, I meant every one. He said, I know that now. I've known it for a while. He stopped. I let it go too far before I did anything about it. I'm sorry for that. I said, you're doing something about it now. He said, I asked her to leave this morning. I said, I know, the nurse told me. He said, I should have done it a long time ago. I said, you're doing it now.
We had 3 days. Not 3 days of dramatic revelations or long reconstructions of 12 years of damage, 3 days of being in a room together, which was what we had always done best. He slept a lot, and when he was awake, I was there, and we talked about ordinary things, and sometimes not ordinary things, and I read to him from a book he had always loved, and he held my hand, and we were, for 3 days, in the uncomplicated way of a father and daughter who have always known how to be in the same room together. On the second day, he asked me about my life, the real version, the one Sandra's constructed version had obscured in the conversations of the preceding 12 years. He asked about my work, my friends, the apartment I had described to him in cards that had apparently been interpreted as obligation. He listened with the specific, complete attention he had always given me when I was small, and that I had not received from him in years. On the third day, he told me about the card. He said, the birthday card, 2 years ago. I wrote that because I needed you to know, and I didn't know how else to say it without having a conversation I didn't know how to have yet. I said, I kept it. He said, I hoped you would. I said, I think about you more than you know. I said the words back to him. He said, I thought about you every day. Whatever she told me, whatever I convinced myself, I thought about you every day. I said, I know, Dad. He said, how do you know? I said, because you're my father, and I know you. He died on the morning of the 4th day, quietly, without drama, in the specific, clean way that some deaths go, present and then not present, the transition marked by the moment itself rather than by anything either side of it. I was holding his hand.
My father left me a letter. His lawyer gave it to me at the estate meeting, sealed, with my name on it in his handwriting. I did not open it for 3 days. I carried it with me for 3 days before I was ready. When I opened it, it was 2 pages. I will not read all of it to you because it belongs to me and to him, and some things are not for telling. But there is one sentence I will give you because I think it is the most important thing in this entire story. He wrote, I spent too long listening to someone else's version of you when I had the original right in front of me. The original. I sat with that word for a long time. The original. That is what I had been for 12 years while Sandra's version circulated. The original. Present, consistent, sending cards and making calls and showing up, the original of a daughter who loved her father, existing alongside the constructed version that had been placed between us. The original is always still there, whatever is built on top of it, whatever version of you someone else constructs and circulates and manages into the spaces that should belong to you. The original is underneath it, waiting. He found it in the end. 3 days were not 12 years. I will not pretend they were. The grief of what those 12 years cost, the Sunday calls that became shorter, the visits that became formal, the distance that accumulated, is real, and it does not resolve because the ending was good. Good endings do not undo losses. They are simply good endings. But he found his way back, and I was there when he did.
We had 3 days. Not 3 days of dramatic revelations or long reconstructions of 12 years of damage, 3 days of being in a room together, which was what we had always done best. He slept a lot, and when he was awake, I was there, and we talked about ordinary things, and sometimes not ordinary things, and I read to him from a book he had always loved, and he held my hand, and we were, for 3 days, in the uncomplicated way of a father and daughter who have always known how to be in the same room together. On the second day, he asked me about my life, the real version, the one Sandra's constructed version had obscured in the conversations of the preceding 12 years. He asked about my work, my friends, the apartment I had described to him in cards that had apparently been interpreted as obligation. He listened with the specific, complete attention he had always given me when I was small, and that I had not received from him in years. On the third day, he told me about the card. He said, "The birthday card, 2 years ago. I wrote that because I needed you to know, and I didn't know how else to say it without having a conversation I didn't know how to have yet." I said, "I kept it." He said, "I hoped you would." I said, "I think about you more than you know." I said the words back to him. He said, "I thought about you every day. Whatever she told me, whatever I convinced myself, I thought about you every day." I said, "I know, Dad." He said, "How do you know?" I said, "Because you're my father, and I know you." He died on the morning of the 4th day, quietly, without drama, in the specific, clean way that some deaths go, present and then not present, the transition marked by the moment itself rather than by anything either side of it. I was holding his hand. I want to say something to every daughter who has been slowly, carefully, invisibly moved to the outside of her own father's life by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Keep calling, keep writing, keep showing up, even when the showing up is met with the managed distance of someone who has been told a version of you that has obscured the original. The original is still there, in him, in the part of him that knows you, that has always known you, that built you, that cannot be fully overwritten by someone else's version, no matter how long or carefully that version is applied. My father found his way back through 12 years of constructed distance. He asked a nurse to call me directly. He gave her my number himself. Keep your number available. Keep calling. Keep sending the cards. And know that somewhere under what has been built between you, the original is still there. She doesn't stay silent. She doesn't stay broken. She rises. Sometimes rising is a 4-hour drive on a Tuesday morning because the hospital called your name and not hers. Sometimes rising is 3 days in a room holding your father's hand. Sometimes the most powerful thing that happens is not confrontation or exposure or justice served publicly. Sometimes it is simply, he remembered, and you were there. Subscribe. New story every week, and every single one of them ends the same way. She rises. Leave a comment. Have you ever been slowly moved to the outside of a relationship that should have been yours? Tell me. I read every single one.